In the late 13th century, Europe faced a new threat from the east, the Ottomans, rising from Anatolia, conquering the Balkans and shocking Europe. Their disciplined armies overwhelmed kingdoms, spreading panic across Europe. The Pope called for a new crusade, but Western knights underestimated the Ottomans. The coming battle would become one of the greatest disasters in medieval history. The age of the Crusades was over. A new era had begun. In 1396, a grand European army gathered on the Danube, determined to crush Sultan Bayezid and reclaim the Balkans. Knights from France, Burgundy, Germany, and England joined Hungarian forces under King Sigismund. Their confidence was sky-high, banners flying, armor gleaming. But pride blinded them. At Nicopolis, Sigismund advised caution. Let experienced infantry fight first, then strike with the knights. The French refused, insisting on leading the charge. Charging uphill, they fell into a trap. Hidden stakes broke their cavalry, and Ottoman archers and infantry finished the job. The Crusader army collapsed, thousands were killed or captured. The Sultan ordered many nobles executed. News of the disaster sent shockwaves through Europe. The myth of Western invincibility was shattered. Nicopolis proved the Ottomans were a military force to be reckoned with. The old ways, reckless charges and chivalric pride, were obsolete. Europe had to adapt or face defeat. The defeat was a brutal wake-up call. The Ottomans had changed the rules of war. Europe's survival depended on learning those rules. The age of the knight was ending. Nicopolis exposed a deep divide between Western Crusaders and Eastern European leaders. Local rulers like King Sigismund and Mircea of Wallachia had years of experience fighting the Ottomans. They knew battles weren't tournaments. They required strategy, patience, and discipline. Western knights, obsessed with glory and cavalry charges, dismissed local tactics as cowardly. This arrogance led to disaster. The Ottomans used light cavalry and archers to lure enemies into traps, then crush them with janissaries. Western armies ignored advice about scouting, supply lines, and terrain. The Balkans demanded a different kind of warfare. The failure to respect local expertise cost the Crusaders dearly. Pride blinded them to the realities of Ottoman warfare. It was a costly lesson in humility and adaptation. To beat the Ottomans, Europe needed inside knowledge. Konstantin Mihailovich, a Serb captured and forced to serve as a janissary, provided just that. After escaping, he wrote Memoirs of a Janissary, a rare, detailed look at the Ottoman war machine. He described their discipline, organization, and use of combined arms, infantry, cavalry, and artillery. But he also revealed weaknesses, reliance on set battle plans, struggles in winter, and vulnerability if their formation was disrupted. Constantine warned against charging their defensive positions. He advocated for discipline, fortified camps, and using war wagons, tactics that could blunt Ottoman attacks. His message was clear. Intelligence and organization, not blind courage, were the keys to victory. His insights became a secret weapon for Europe. The Ottomans could be beaten, but only by adapting and learning. Constantine's story was a turning point in the struggle. Knowledge, not just bravery, would decide the future. Europe finally had a blueprint for resistance. At the core of the Ottoman army stood the janissaries, elite soldiers recruited through the devshirme or child levy. Christian boys from the Balkans were taken, converted, and raised to be utterly loyal to the Sultan. Forbidden to marry or own property, their only family was their regiment. The janissaries were Europe's first modern standing army, professional, disciplined, and always ready for war. Trained from childhood, they mastered archery and later firearms. Their discipline was legendary. They stood firm even when leaders fell. On defense, they built trenches and ramparts, placing cannons behind earthworks. Charging their position was suicide. Knights were cut down by volleys of arrows and gunfire. The key to fighting them was patience and strategy. Avoid frontal assaults, use artillery, and fortify your own position. The Wagenburg, or Wagon Fort, became a crucial countermeasure. It forced the Ottomans to attack fortified positions, leveling the playing field. The Janissaries changed European warfare forever. Only disciplined modern armies could stand against them. Not all intelligence came from defectors. Some came from daring spies. Bertrandin de la Brocquière, a Burgundian noble, traveled through the Ottoman Empire disguised as a merchant. He observed the Sultan's army up close, noting their discipline, endurance, and effective use of resources. He saw their weaknesses too: lighter armor, less effective bows, and vulnerability to disciplined, well-led European armies. Bertrandin stressed the need for unity, professional soldiers, and a single chain of command. He proposed a combined land and sea campaign, march through the Balkans, attack the Turkish coast, and cut off supplies. His report was a practical blueprint for victory. He showed that the Ottomans were formidable, but not invincible. Discipline and strategy, not just courage, were essential. Western leaders began to think more strategically. The age of reckless crusades was ending. Intelligence and planning would shape the next phase of the conflict. Europe was finally learning how to fight back. The struggle between Europe and the Ottomans was as much about faith as it was about armies. Both sides used religion to inspire their soldiers and demonize the enemy. European leaders called for holy war, promising spiritual rewards for those who fought the infidel. The Ottomans framed their expansion as jihad, with the Sultan as both king and caliph. Soldiers on both sides believed they fought for God, making the conflict even more intense. Yet the Ottomans often allowed Christians and Jews to practice their faith under the millet system as long as they paid a tax. This tolerance helped maintain stability, but the Dev-Shirme system, taking Christian boys for the Janissaries, remained a source of fear. Religion united and motivated, but also deepened the divide. The war for souls was as fierce as the war for land. Faith became both a weapon and a shield in this epic struggle. For over a century, Europe seemed doomed to lose against the Ottomans. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was a low point, but slowly Europe adapted, learning from defeat, adopting new tactics, and building disciplined armies. The Age of Knights gave way to pikemen and musketeers formations like the Spanish Tercio. Leaders like John Hunyadi used wagon forts and defensive warfare to halt Ottoman advances, as at Belgrade in 1456. Skanderbeg in Albania waged a relentless guerrilla war, tying up Ottoman forces for decades. These victories proved the Ottomans could be beaten. Adaptation, discipline, and smart leadership were the keys. The myth of Ottoman invincibility was broken. Europe had found a way to fight back. The tide was turning. The blueprint for resistance was set. The ultimate test came in 1529, when Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent besieged Vienna. The city's defenders, outnumbered but well-prepared, fortified their walls and relied on disciplined musketeers and pikemen. The siege was brutal. Ottoman cannons battered the city, Janissaries stormed the walls, and tunnels threatened to undermine the defenses. But the defenders held firm, repairing walls, repelling assaults, and fighting underground. Heavy rains and disease weakened the Ottoman camp. After a month, Suleiman retreated. Vienna's survival marked a turning point. The Ottoman advance into Central Europe was stopped. Europe's new military system, gunpowder, discipline, and engineering, had proven itself. The era of Ottoman expansion was over. The balance of power had shifted. Europe had adapted and survived. The struggle that began with panic and defeat ended with resilience and innovation. The Ottoman threat would linger, but the tide had turned. A new chapter in European history had begun. The age of modern states was on the horizon,